You have to be a little bit crazy, I think, to carve as much as I do sometimes because I question my sanity. Like, should I really keep doing this?
What if you could get your pottery to look translucent and have a bunch of different detail to it? What is up, Shaping Nation? This is Nick Torres here, and on this episode of Shaping Your Pottery, I got to interview Kyle Guymon. Kyle makes some really incredible translucent porcelain pottery that he carves every detail, and it looks absolutely incredible. In this episode, you'll learn how Kyle makes his carving designs and how he gets it to look translucent. You also learn about why Kyle started adding slip casting into his repertoire. Finally, you also learn about how Kyle started separating himself from other artists. And there's so much more in this episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'll see you guys in there. Kyle, welcome to Shaping Your Pottery, and share with me what is something people might not know about you.
Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity. One thing that people might not know about me, I like throwing more than carving, and glazing is the my least favorite part of the process.
I feel like glazing is most people's just. I get that so much. They just absolutely do not like glazing. I
Uh,
don't like glazing myself either.
if
So
if I could pass it off to somebody and just say, here's the pot that's carved, glaze it and finish it, it'd save so much time and I'd be a lot happier because it's so frustrating.
absolutely. So tell me the story how you got started in ceramics.
The story was I took it in high school. I really loved it when I was in high school, and like I just had a spark, and I just kept it, and I had that spark, and then I got out of high school, and I started doing construction for a few years, and I soon realized that I didn't really want to do construction for the rest of my life. Like I liked my body, I didn't want to be 35 looking like I was 50, with a busted back or anything like that. So I decided to go back to school. And while I was going to school, my high school teacher, she moved to another state, but then my drawing teacher when I was in high school took over the program, the ceramics program at the high school. And she actually let me come back and keep throwing and making work. And so I would go back to the high school on off hours and throw and make stuff and then take it home and finish it and then bring it back. And that love was just always kind of there for me and it never left. And then once I got back into college and I started college again, I was just taking all the general classes. And as I was doing that, I was still making pots. And then I got into a couple art festivals and then I had a gallery show. And then I took my very first ceramics class in college. So I actually had a gallery show before I even did a ceramics program in college. And that kind of just sparked it. And I went from there with it.
So how did this gallery show really impact the way you make your pottery further?
The first gallery show,
Yes.
it was it really helped me see that like there was value with my work. When people outside of myself or my friends actually took value upon it and actually wanted to showcase it and put it in a gallery show and then actually be able to sell that work because a lot of the times you're sitting in your little world, right? And then within that world, you're like, this is the most precious thing I've ever made and it's the greatest thing and I love it and I'm so proud of it. I'm the best ever. And then you put it out in the world and it's cookie cutter or it's the same that right, but then actually being able to actually get that validation that the work that I was doing, I was going in the right direction is really helped me like push and make my own work.
I love that. So what would you say was your biggest obstacle when you started making pottery?
Well, kind of just like the accessibility to it, right? Like my teacher let me come back, but like I could only go in off hours and stuff like that. I didn't have a studio where I could work all the time. And then I was living with a bunch of friends, and how much room do you have when you got, a couple roommates living in the house with you, going to school and trying to work and do everything else like that. So the biggest obstacle at first was the accessibility, but having that opportunity to actually go back and throw pots and then I could take them with me was the game changer that led me into it.
When was the moment when you're able to start making pottery like just on your own without having to travel to go actually make it?
Once I started taking, well, no, because I bought my first pottery wheel before I was even taking my first ceramics class in at the college. So I mean, like I actually set it up. I moved into another home and I set it up in the dining room area because there was tile floor, and I put a tarp down and I put the wheel on top of it, and I was throwing in the dining room and carving, off into the off sections, and I'd lay sheets down and sit on top of that in like a little banana chair and sit there and carve away. And then when I'd get done, I'd stand up and all the shavings would fall on the ground, and then I'd wrap it all up and then go dump it outside into the backyard, and then just kept rolling like that for a few years. And then once I got into the college and the university, I had my own space. I had, once you get into like the BFA program and stuff like that, you have your own shelves and your own lockers and your own space. So I was able to, work more freely at that point.
I love that. So let's talk about your pottery. In one sentence, can you tell me what you make?
Wheel thrown translucent pottery with slip cast cups. I just started doing slip cast work in the past few months. I never thought I would be a slip caster, mold maker. I never thought I would do it, but it's helped me change the game of what I can do.
So why did you get into slip casting?
Because I got to a point where a cup was taking me 2 hours plus to do one cup, and being a husband and a father, the more time I take away from my family to put into the ceramics, I'm taking that valuable time away from my wife and daughters and putting it into clay. So I had to find a way where I could speed up the process a little bit, but still make the pots mine and make them unique, and not, the cookie cutter glaze and this and that and a mug in and out. I still had to make my work. And the best way to do that was to create molds of some of my cup shapes. But then I didn't want the same mold made every single time, right? Like I still wanted to make my work and have my voice within it, because I don't know, when I'm making the work, I want each piece to stand out on its own, And so what I've done is I make a mold. I throw a cup and then I make a mold of it, and then I cut that up into 4 different pieces, and then I can mix and match all of those pieces together. So like this is like an elephant cup with the astronaut design on the backside. And then so you're getting all these different views and, forms from the cup. And so I'm able to, astronaut again, but then, I can put a cardinal design to mix it with a blue jay design, to mix it with the form and everything like that. And by doing that, it's allowing me to play with my carvings more, but also play with the forms more, because now I can, mix and match, and I can piece all these together. And each one is different, but they're the same mold, but each piece is going to be different, because on all of the like elephant pieces, like I carve the eyes, each eye is different. Like each elephant face has a different eye, because every elephant has a different eye, right? So I have to put in that work. And then like with the cardinals and the blue jays and the birds, like every bird has different feathers and patterns and lace. So I try and do different textures and stuff like that on every piece, but they're all slip cast, right? And so essentially they're the same, but I have to make them different. I can't make them the same. And it's allowing me to start to play with different color combinations and patterns and, carvings, and then different designs inside of like the astronaut design. So the slip cast, it's been a way for me to streamline the process, but then yet still be able to carve each piece, but then make each piece different. And then because trying to, carve this with these 3 different designs, I mean, that would take me 3 or 4 hours to do this one piece, right? But now I
Hmm.
can knock this one piece out a lot quicker. And now I can start to play with different colors and combos and imagery. So that's the reason why I did it. But I mean, with the translucent porcelain, so this is a cup that I, translucent porcelain, but then like once you light it up or put a light source within it, I mean, it just, and this is what I love right here, right? Is just like this is that beauty. And then trying to be able to find a way where I can spend more time carving pieces as opposed to just making cup, 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 cup. And then, I can only make so many vases. But now this way, I can make more, teapots and pitchers and vases and start to make, more intriguing work, I guess you can say, because you can see how, just the translucency of that porcelain is. So that's why I'm doing the slip cast. It's a new challenge. It's a new technique. I've never done it. I had to reach out to quite a few friends of mine for help, you know, and that's what I love. We talked about, like, that's what I love about the SRAMS community is how open and free we are. And, you know, I ask these guys for some help and, they throw it out there, oh yeah, do this. Oh, I have this issue. We'll stop doing that. Do this instead. And it helps and it picks it up that way.
Absolutely. I love that so much. Shaping Nation, there's always an easier way to make pottery or a way to make pottery faster, but you can still put your own spin on things, even if it is doing the same thing over and over again. I love that so much.
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell me the story how you started making the pottery that you make today.
So the the translucent porcelain and the carvings, when I first started, when I was doing the carvings with, like, before even college, when I was going back to my high school and still making it, the clay that they were using was a cone 5 off white with grog in it. And I would carve and, like, you'd get grog marks and they would pop off and I couldn't get the fine details that I was looking for. And then the only colors that they had were oxides. She didn't really have, all the Amico, Speedball, or Mako underglazes, that we have now and we can get now. We didn't have all the colors back then. And I was carving all these pots and it was cone 5, right? And so I was very limited on to what I could make at the time. And I was making the work and I was sitting there and I kept banging my head against it, like, like, I'm making this type of work, but it's not my work. Like, it's not who I am as a potter because I didn't have the color range, I didn't have the firing temperature, and I didn't have the clay body that I liked. And so I got into college, and then the professor was, he was awesome. Like, he let me have kind of free reign to do what I wanted, and he let me pick what clays I wanted to throw with. And I loved the feel of B mix. I mean, throwing with B mix versus porcelain, it's kind of like cheating because it's so easy to throw, And the same thing, like, I was throwing and was carving and I was making all these pots and all this other stuff with B mix clay, but it's a kind of a buff clay body, right? Especially in reduction. And the colors just weren't turning out quite how I wanted. And I didn't really experiment too much with underglazes when I was in college. And then I got out and then I started making my own work. And once I started that, then I started really to experiment. And then, you get your first underglazes and it's different than oxides. And then, you can take Amico's bright red. I love Amico. Their underglazes are perfect. I love them. But you can take their underglazes to cone 10, right? And they don't burn out. Like, the colors stay true. Like, the reds stay true. The oranges stay true. The yellows stay true. Purples don't. You just make your own purple, but that's another story. But being able to do that, being able to switch from, the cone 5 clay where I was just using oxides, I knew that's not the type of work I wanted to make, or it wasn't my type of work. And so it took a while to where I had access to cone 10, to clay bodies. And then the B mix, again, was still kind of buff and I didn't like it. So I wanted that white, that pure background, so the colors would pop, so the vibrancy would pop, so my carvings wouldn't get muddied up or blown out from the firings or the glazes. So then I switched to porcelain, and I do a lot in porcelain. I still throw in B mix. You know, there's some forms that I'll still do in B mix and stuff like that, but for the most part, I've switched to porcelain. And if you've ever worked with porcelain, it's one of those things where the reward in the end is amazing, but the journey is very frustrating. You know, it doesn't stack up right. It won't stand up. You can't stretch it. You can't throw as big. You know, certain things, it limits you a little bit. But the color response and then the translucency far outweigh, you know, trying to do some other things with stoneware clay bodies, for me at least.
I have definitely heard before that porcelain is quite the beast to work with, especially if
Yeah.
you're like beginning with working with porcelain.
Well,
So
actually, I would, if you're going to begin with clay and like, you know, you want to work with porcelain, just start with porcelain, right? Because you won't know the difference between B mix with grog or like a stone or with a grog clay body where you can throw it easier and it stacks up. Like you're going to go through the trials of learning how to throw anyways, right? And so if you're throwing, why not start with the product you want to start with? You're going to have a learning curve with it, but you're not going to have to spend all that time throwing stoneware and then learn how to use porcelain, right? If you know you want to use porcelain, just jump right into porcelain and start using it. Because if that's what you want to end up using, you're going to waste a ton of money anyways, you know, because it's porcelain and it sucks, but it's worth it in the end, right?
that is some excellent
So
advice right there for anybody that wants to start throwing and working with porcelain. I love that advice.
jump into it because like I'm sorry, but there's no shortcut. Like working with porcelain, it's like throwing with cream cheese sometimes. It doesn't stack up. It's not going to stretch. It's not going to do these other things that your stoneware, your grog clay body can. But man, it's so pretty. I love the white background. So yeah, I love the translucency. So
I love it. You Most of your pottery contains carvings. Can you walk me through how you create the carvings and how you get so much detail onto each carving?
so I just throw a form. I wish I would have had a form ready for you, but I just throw a form, right? And then I get a stencil, and then I draw the stencil. I carve the stencil onto the outside. Give me one second. I'll show you right now. So this is just a stencil. I just drew it on a plastic sheet, plastic bag, and then like this cardinal vase. So now I can just take this stencil and I just put it onto the form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I trace it. And then if you look on the inside, can you see that?
Yeah.
So I stick my hand like on the inside of the pot, and then I'll push out. So I push out from the inside, and then I'll come back through, and then like push this section in, and push in all the feathers and the details, and then I come back and throw and carve it. And I had one of my buddies he's a figurative worker, sculptor, and I was doing a demo, and he looked at me and he's like, "Man, you work just like we do," because of the way that they push in the clay and they manipulate the clay and they push it out. He says it's the same way that they do it. Well, not same way, but same principle, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
just that manipulation of the clay. It's that push in, push out, push in, push out. And then to get all the fine line and the details, like diamond core. I love diamond core tools. They're the best. So if you want like that super fine details and those carvings, that's how you get all of that. And you know, I modify my own tools, but that's a loop tool and that's a square tool. And so, yeah, I just, to get all the details, it's within the tools, right? It's a diamond core tools. And then to get all the glazing and the colors and the color response, because that's a cone 10 porcelain celadon piece, right? But look how true and red those birds are.
Yeah, the red. So good.
right? It just pops. And so, trying to do that, figuring out the tools you're going to use, the glazes you're going to use, really helped change the work, and so carving it, it's just that push in, push out, push in, push out, that detail, that work it in, and then using the fine line tools to carve everything out.
That was an
Uh,
excellent description of that. I love that.
yeah, but word of advice, if you want to carve, if you're going to go down the path of carving, buckle up because you're going to spend hours on a piece and then it might crack in the kiln, right? It might crack in drying, or the glazes won't turn out, or the glaze will run, or if you're working with reduction, you might get a side reduction or this or that or blah. So you have to be a little bit crazy, I think, to carve as much as I do sometimes because I question my sanity. Like, should I really keep doing this? Because sometimes you'll have a kiln load and you'll lose 5-10 pots of it, and you add that time up in those hours, and you're like, it's a lot of hours I just wasted. So if you're gonna carve, buckle up because it's a journey. It's a journey for sure.
I love that. So let's talk about discovering your voice. You contribute your growth as an artist to trial and error. Can you tell me more about this?
When I was in high school, I always just loved carving. I could take my time. I could sit there and mess around and have fun. And then when I got out, and before I even got into college, I was throwing a lot and I was carving a lot, and then once you get into the BFA program, they want you to do this and they want you to try that and they want to take you out of your comfort zone. And so got, I got to the point where I was just making a lot of work just because, I'll do this or do that instead of like focusing on carving. And then once I graduated, I realized like I don't want to be just that functional potter that just makes the same old thing time and time again. And then I did an art festival, and on a break I started walking up and down, right? And like I thought I had these great pots, right? I did some slip trailing on the outside, but I had copper reds and some chinos and some blues, rutile blues, and all this other stuff. And I went to the next booth, down, and what did they have? Copper reds and some blues. And you go to the next booth, and what do they have? And then you go to the next booth, and what do they have? And it was, I sat there and I questioned, like, what am I doing, right? Like, do I want to just make the same work that all these other potters are doing, or do I want to actually be able to stand out away from all the other potters? And I got back into, well, like, who am I as an artist? How much time do I want to spend making this stuff, right? And so that was the moment where I was like, yeah, let's go back to carving. Let's go back to finding your voice and getting back to who you are. And so that's where it started me and pushed me, was getting back into it. Was the was that show, and I was like, I can't be the same potter as everybody else. My work has to separate because I have to separate, or else, my pot and my work is just going to be associated with, Joe Johnson, down the road, and I didn't want that. So going back to carving was the first step in finding my voice.
Absolutely love that. Shaping Nation, do not be afraid to separate yourself from everybody else. A lot of people are going to be making the same thing over and over again, but if you could separate yourself from them, your voice is truly going to start showing up. I love that so much.
And it might take a minute, right? It's going to take a minute, but that's okay, right? Because once you find it and you just go for it, your voice is your voice, and people will, you'll separate. It might take you 5-10 years, but you'll separate.
Absolutely agree 100%. So, what does it mean to you to find your pottery voice?
Everything, right? Like being able to throw and carve porcelain translucent, like like when a piece comes out, like this piece, right? Like when this piece comes out. It just, all the time, all the hours, all the money, all the glaze tests and everything. And once that piece actually comes out of the kiln, and then it becomes translucent, like that is what just really makes the work worth it. Because when a piece turns out, after all that time and after all that energy and everything goes into it, like that's where your voice actually pops and sings and makes it worth it. Yeah.
Definitely agree 100%. I love that. So, what advice would you give to someone that is looking to discover their own unique voice with their pottery?
Don't be afraid, right? Don't be afraid. Like, if you want to carve, carve. But within that same sentence, like, I sometimes, like, these are the new forms the new designs that I'm doing, right? Because I love throwing, right? I love throwing more than I do carving. But people know me, like, for my carving and my style. But sometimes I don't want to carve a piece. I just don't want to carve it. And I just need that freedom and that release away from the carving to throw color on a pot, to just let the brush run across the surface, right? Not to be tied into being so tight and so controlled within my work, what my carving does. Like these new paintings and stuff that I'm doing is giving me that freedom to express another side of me, right? And if you're trying to find your voice, don't be afraid to experiment. Like, throw this out there, throw this glaze on there, do this underglaze, do this transfer, right? Do this carving, do this style. Go to cone 5, go to 04, go to 7, go to reduction, go to wood fire, go to soda, go to salt. I mean, there's so many options within ceramics. And if you want to find your voice, you have to find the pots that you are attracted to, right? If you like a certain work, go after that work, right? Find the artists that are doing that type of work and then build a community with them, right? If you want to do wood fire, go find wood fire potters, right? If you want to do porcelain or carving, find those guys and attach to them and figure out who's ever doing that, or go to your local studio and find out what they're firing to or who's in that local studio and pick their brains and figure it out. But just don't be afraid and don't think that your style or your voice is going to be the same forever. Because I've been carving for, 10 years and my brain gets so wrapped up in it, right? And it's so tight and the carvings are so controlled that I need a release from my own work. And so that's what those new brushworks are coming from, is because I just need a release from having to sit there for, carving a piece for 4, 5, 6 hours, or just throw a piece, trim it up, polish the outside, sand it, and then throw some brushwork on it and still be able to express myself within the piece.
Absolutely agree. Shaping Nation, you don't need to be tied down doing the same thing over and over and over again. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try new things, because that's where your voice will truly start showing up. I love that so much. So as we're coming to a close here today, what is one thing you want to hammer home with my audience today?
Have fun, experiment, don't be afraid, right? Don't be afraid, because I think a lot of the time people, like you said, you want to find your voice. And I think one of the problems is people sit there and they get so wrapped up into, well, I can't do it, or I don't know how, or this or that, or like, reach out, go to your local university and find out when they're bringing in artists for demonstrations, right? Because universities offer demonstration. They bring in demoing artists all the time, right? Go to your local pottery studio, right? Find out, the artists that are in there, or the classes that they're doing, or what you can take, right? Or find the artists on Instagram that you like and, start commenting on their posts saying, hey, I really like this. Hey, that's really nice. Or send them a DM, right? Right? How do you do this? And just don't be afraid. If you want to do it, there's no one is going to do it for you, right? Especially in ceramics. Like, I'm not going to throw a vase for you and let you carve it, right? Like, you got to throw your own vase, right? So if you want to find your voice, don't be afraid. And go after it and actually do it.
Absolutely agree. Some excellent parting words of advice. Kyle, it was really great chatting today. Where can my audience go and learn more about you?
Kyle Guymon Pottery on Instagram. That's my main social. I don't have time to do Twitter or X, whatever it is, and TikTok and Instagram and blah blah blah. Right? Like my brain, I Instagram. That's where you can find me. Kyle Guymon Pottery at Instagram.